the secret of the inner earth. Like the human being, the planet itself also has dimensions. These 7 bodies are 7 main energy gates, also called chakras or sun gates. They are the activation gates. The masters of Lemuria and Atlantis knew about the main geomantic energy vortices. With the help of extraterrestrial technology and levitation, they built large pyramids onto these centers of energy. Therefore, pyramids around the world stand on these gates of energy in order to mark the power centers. They are situated in the jungles of the Amazon, in the highlands of Mexico, on the ocean floors of the Atlantic and the Pacific, under the desert of Taklamakan, in China, and many other places on Earth. Many of these pyramids were built underground and will be discovered in the near future. Pyramids are the mirror of human evolution, with the 4 dimensions. God is the 5th dimension and exists beyond the pyramid. This is why the last stone of each 4-faced pyramid is missing. Hence, the stone of completion is the unification of man with the Creator in the 5th dimension. That is the reason why human beings have 5 fingers. They are created for the 5th dimension.
The reality of massive engineering tools in Egypt, of course, is something that is not presently known. The existence of huge interior structures with mathematical precision that range in size from some 20 centimeters for the air shafts to the massive chambers known as the King's and Queen's Chamber that require blocks of some 2 to 20 tons apiece, suggest a parent technology that is no longer known to our present Western society. When the documentary Mysteries of the Sphinx was being made, the engineers asked themselves, how could these massive blocks be moved into position? It was obvious from special consultants who were moving upwards of 200 tons that there was no present technology that could take these very large, massive blocks from the quarries and move them up some 480 feet above the surface of the Earth unless there was a superior parent technology. In talking with specialists in hypersonic vibrations in New York and Chicago, it was suggested that a type of vibratory source, perhaps a 1/4 of a mile in length, would have to be necessary as some airborne platform that would require the vibratory mechanisms necessary to move these large blocks into place. Certainly, our use of certain sound techniques inside the chambers show that the Great Pyramid is a type of vibratory laser, and if it can be activated properly, in my interpretation, could allow us to understand how certain sound structures can move massive blocks of stone.
The high priests used the pyramids as initiation temples because the energy inside the pyramids was so powerful that students or neophytes, through meditation, were carried into a different dimension of consciousness. The student, with his physical body and senses, was moved into a higher world. Thus he could perceive the spiritual world. Until this very day, another great secret remains. The pyramids were used as natural doors of dimension gates, as openings and doors leading to the inner earth. As much as there is an outer world, there is, because of polarity, an inner world. In other words, the earth is hollow. As things are on a small scale, so they are on a large scale. Hermes Trismegistus taught that everything in the universe is set up according to the same organizational plan. One could say that the Earth is like a huge atom, hollow inside, with a nucleus at the center which represents the inner sun. Just as we humans do not see the outer curve of the globe, one is not able to perceive the inner curve when entering Hypereia, the legendary lost crystal cities of Agartha. The initiated were able to get in touch with the civilizations of the inner Earth through gates. Until the sinking of Atlantis, this was general knowledge.
Plato in his book, the Timaeus, speaks about an earlier civilization, a race of godlike beings, at least 9,000 years before the time of the peoples of Athens. He also speaks of how the great historian Solon refers to Egypt as a colony of Atlantis. It is clear from evidences we have recently made in Mesoamerica, specifically in Guatemala, with the ancient canal system that we have uncovered through remote sensing radar, that it was there in Central America where north and south tectonic plates meet, where there are great statues called the Atlans, that there was indeed some type of civilization that could be called Atlantean. Clearly the evidence is in Egypt of great structures beneath the sands of Giza, as well as the evidences of great structures beneath Gobi in the Far East, suggest that Atlantean models of higher intelligence were over the earth at a much earlier historic period, suggesting that Atlantis was a type of civilization rather than a specific place of people, technology, worship, and belief.
Where is the entrance to the inner earth? My feeling is that these are openings several hundred kilometers wide, not more than that. One on the North Pole, one on the South Pole. They may exist in a different dimension. They may be made visible at will or from time to time, depending on certain cosmic and terrestrial conditions. These are more of speculations. However, I know for sure that, for example, polar flights are forbidden to fly straight over the pole. They always deviate away. After a very suspicious crash of a New Zealand airliner, chartered airliner in late 70s, early 80s, that was supposed to fly over the South Pole looking for the opening of the inner Earth.
After Atlantis, only a few native Indians on the Amazon River and the Hopi Indians knew of the entrances to huge underground cities. They reported that shortly before the cyclical end of humankind, the seed for the next humankind was brought to safety in the inner earth by beings. Human beings with white and bluish skin and golden angelic hair, who traveled in flying saucers from the inner earth.
Expedition in the autumn of 46, the early spring of 47, to the South Pole. This is an expedition that has been almost forgotten, and it's very hard to come up with any information about it. the few articles that were published at that time in, let's say, National Geographic magazine would not give any clue to the real intention of that expedition. However, recently we discovered a unique documentary film in color, 1 hour long, made by the US Navy. It was a massive naval operation that involved an aircraft carrier, several battleships, an armed submarine, and probably another 20 supply and battleships. It involved 4,000 troops, US troops, and the rumor is that there were also British and Russian contingents within these 4,000 troops. It was a massive naval operation. It was not, as it has been presented to the public, that it was a peaceful expedition to explore the natural resources of the South Pole. They descended to Little America, which is the place of the previous Admiral Byrd landings on the South Pole. And then they started a massive overflight over the whole area of the South Pole, trying to locate the German base that was established there almost 10 years earlier. The Germans started somewhere in 1936-37, seriously exploring the South Pole, and by the time the war ended, the rumor is that they have established a massive underground colony with at least 100,000 scientists, researchers, elite SS troops, children from Hitlerjugend, young boys and girls that were to become the seed of this new and colony that was to be built under the principles of the super race selection.
In our research in Africa, the Far East, and in the mountains of South America, we have come across statuary of very grotesque beings who, according to the Indian and shamanistic tradition, went into the earth at a time of a great cataclysm. If we take Atlantis as a model for survival, it is clear in the folklore and literature of the major continents of our planet that some of the races went into the earth. And I brought with me from Africa pictures of these grotesque serpent-like beings. Many of them correspond to the extraterrestrial reports and photographs of some of these so-called snake people or serpent people. It is very clear also that there was the survival of the ancestry of the Adamic race, referred to in our scriptures, as well as in the teachings of the Hungarian and German people that came out of the Gobi area. It is in this area of Lap Nor that we have recently found evidences of an earlier European type humanity that did survive some type of cataclysm according to the myths of the Far East. We have thus in our tradition a vast folklore, anthropology, and cosmology that connect the peoples of this planet with that of other worlds.
The Nazis were better informed by the secret esoteric orders and had exact knowledge about the lost cities of Agartha and Shambhalla. Many of their expeditions involved searching for the entrances into the inner world and the lost techniques of the gods. That is, UFOs, the Ark of the Covenant, and much more. Thus, films like Indiana Jones are not mere fiction. German expedition in search of Agartha. Some esoteric correlations of the 19th century and of the Third Reich are hidden nowadays under a veil of the past. Thus, only some isolated relationships can be uncovered. For a while, Dietrich Eckart lived at the foot of the mountain Untersberg and was initiated into the medieval mysteries and into the legends of caves. Adolf Hitler spent many hours with Dietrich Eckart at the Obersalzberg mountain, and both were followers of the hollow earth theory of Hans Erbinger. The Untersberg was already considered by the Templars to be a volcano with an access to the inner earth and to the legendary hollow world. Thus, there are stories of the disappearances of people in the Untersberg and how, 60 years later, the same people surfaced without having aged. Other German legends deal with the myth of the end of the world. In the legends, King Barbarossa is asleep in the mountain, and after hundreds of years he rises up with his knights for the last battle at the end of time, in order to help good triumph.
I'm speaking now as a scientist. I do not want to confuse subsurface temples and grottos and structures of civilizations that go down approximately a mile or two from the surface of the Earth with the so-called inner Earth theory. In my work in Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, it is clear that there are vast tunnel systems that go hundreds of kilometers under the mountains, allowing the Indian peoples to connect between national borders. We know also between Mexico and New Mexico in North America that the Indians have a subterranean system of corridors that allow the tribal federations from North America to meet, even privately, without notifying the American or Mexican authorities. Clearly, these structures are there as a result of some type of volcanic activity or catastrophic event some 28 million years ago, as we have measured in areas of North Mexico, where the surface of the Earth changed, allowing volcanic openings and porous materials to construct, as it were, underground cavities. Into these cavities, members of the human society found shelter from the noxious poisons and gases and orders of destruction that took place rather suddenly. If we look at our planetary system, there is an obvious grid of underground cavities, from the areas of the Gobi areas of Central Asia to the areas of Malta in the Mediterranean, to areas even of the mountains of Untersberg in Central Europe, Mont Blanc, Jungfrau, to areas we have specifically worked with seismology in central North Mexico, and also areas of the Andes. Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia in particular have underground structures that run for hundreds of kilometers. In Southeast Asia, we know that these structures also exist in the areas of Sumatra, Borneo, and Indonesia. Clearly, throughout the world, there are major areas which seem to be contact points with parallel evolution.
Dietrich Eckhardt